The Chicago Bulls are dangerously close to setting yet another season sitting directly in the middle of the pack in the NBA. And as most Bulls fans know, continually being in the middle is really the worst place that the franchise can be. And one of the questions we're going to ask today is, are the Bulls really prepared to do anything to get the Bulls out of the middle, no matter which direction that may mean? And then we're also going to take an updated look at the Zach LaVine to Denver Nuggets trade talk that's going on and what the biggest thing is seemingly holding that up. All that plus the mailbag right after this.
You are now tuned in to Chicago Bulls Central, your number one place for all Chicago Bulls news and content.
What's going on, Bulls fans? Welcome to another episode of Chicago Bulls Central, your number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. I'm the host there, Haize, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at Bulls Central Pod on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that said, let's go ahead and get into this content for today, y'all. And it's been an interesting kind of few days for the Chicago Bulls fans, right? On Friday, it seemed like a lot of Bulls fans are all, excited and everything about, the Bulls, beating the Boston Celtics after we beat that team. And, then it came crashing down to earth and fans still kept the faith. And, the Bulls now, they're in a 2-game losing streak. Not a surprise there. They're tied with the Detroit Pistons for the 9th and 10th seed. And then, surprisingly enough, even with their slow start, the Philadelphia 76ers are quietly 1.5 games behind both those teams for a play-in spot. Just goes to show you, it takes a lot to be completely out in the Eastern Conference. So far through 30 games this season, the Chicago Bulls sit at 13th in offensive rating on the season, and 24th in defensive rating. We run the fastest pace in the league. We're taking a nice amount of three-pointers, plus we're hitting them at a really good clip. And so those things are kind of things that are going the Bulls' way. But unfortunately, all those changes has really led the Chicago Bulls to be right where they have been for the last few years. The Bulls are still on a 37-win pace. I think it may have dropped down to 36 wins now. Keep in mind, we won 39 games last season. So that, again, would be another step back for the Chicago Bulls team. The fact of the matter is that as of right now, right, and the pace can change, all those things can change, but as of right now, the Bulls are slated to have another season in which they've gotten worse yet again from the prior season. Again, that's depending on how you look at things. But once again now, we're seeing right now, and I had to correct myself, the Bulls are on a 35-win pace. So there you go, 4 games below what we won last year. And that's just continually what this is and what this looks like for this Bulls team. Like, the fact is that this team continually gets worse. And not necessarily in talent level. This team does have talent on it, right? But the fact is that we don't have the depth, the talent, or the balance, or even the coaching for this team to really be one of those teams that you can see making any type of run. And once again, it just seems like not only have the Bulls settled, and I'm saying right now, right? And the whole point of this is to say that AK and Eversley have to pick a direction. We once again sit with our foot in two worlds, and we're not doing either one really well. Let's be clear. Even if you're looking at the young player camp, right, developing the young talent and the young players, yes, they're playing minutes. And Dalen Terry, Julian Phillips, Modest Bucilis, they're playing. They're part of the Bulls' rotation. They're getting some minutes. Are they the reason why we're winning games? No, right? The games that we do win, still you're looking heavily at of course, Josh Giddey, Lonzo Ball, Zach LaVine, Nikola Vucevic, and Coby White when he's on. Like that's the biggest part of why we're winning those games. Now, of course, Josh Giddey is part of the younger players. Coby White, Io, you could say that they're part of that younger crew as well, but they're guys that have been in this league for 4+ years at this point, right? And so we're not really doing that well. And then even in leaning in on those vet players, we're not a team that's really that's on pace to win a lot of games while we're developing. And so once again, and it seems like some Bulls fans have fallen for this trap of just thinking that we can compete when we're not. But the most important, whether it's Bulls fans or not, the people who matter the most of that they come to the realization of where this team is and want to avoid being in the middle, it has to be the Bulls front office. And if it's not the front office, we're not going to go anywhere, right? This is not a season coming in that I expected a lot of wins, personally. I had the Bulls pegged to win between 30 and 35 games. So the pace right now is good for my overall predictions for this team, but that's not what I want, right? You don't want your team to lose, and if they are going to, if your team is going to be bad, at least be bad in the sense where it feels like you're headed somewhere, right? It feels like you're working on something. It feels like you're building something. And we sat in the middle with this thing, and it doesn't really feel like we're building towards either direction in any type of meaningful way or important way. We're just not. And as this just keeps going on and keeps going on, like where are things headed? Where are the Bulls realistically headed? I don't know, right? I don't know because, yeah, you could see this team competing, turning on the Jets and maybe competing for a play-in spot. Good, great, whoop-de-doo. What does that then get you? And I hate being in this place, the place where like we're almost forced to be more pessimistic, but we're forced to be more pessimistic because this front office has continually failed day in and day out at every bit of the objectives that they stated for themselves. They've basically failed outside of wanting to change our shot profile and wanting us to play faster. Congrats, you finally got us to doing that. But it's come with us on pace to win even fewer games than what we won before. And I think people can palate. They can understand the sense of if you're going to be a team that, it's just we're working on stuff. We're building on stuff. We're developing these guys. People will buy in and understand, all right, cool. They're working on what they need to work on. Let's see how this team competes over this time. It's great, right? But even this exciting offense can only keep people entertained for so long, and that's starting to fall off. The Bulls are still the second most, take the second most three-point attempts in the league, right? But whereas for a while there, we were actually towards the top five as far as three-point shooting percentage, we've dropped all the way down to where? Middle of the pack at 14th. As far now, 37% still, and there's like 0.4% that separates a lot of those teams there in the middle, but still, as teams start figuring this team out, if they start figuring the Chicago Bulls out, as they start figuring out with the simplicity in the offense that we run already, where's this team headed? And that's the overall thing. Like, you want to leave this season at least. It's not a clear direction now, and that's perfectly fine, right? Not having a direction and not reaching your goal are different things. Right? Had a conversation with somebody in the comment section not too long ago where they're like, well, yeah, we don't seem like we have a direction because AK already told us that this roster wasn't going to be the final roster. That doesn't mean you don't lack a direction. You have to have a direction to get there, right? And the direction comes in how you get to finding the completed version of this roster. And we're not in a clear direction yet. And so, it's things that we've beaten up the front office about for a long time. It's things that at this point we just got to realize that this isn't going to change about the Chicago Bulls front office. This is going to be a front office that continually just lingers around until they absolutely have to make a move. It's like you have to poke them with the stick to make them to get them to get up to remind everybody they ain't dead. And until we get a standard that we hold, that the front office holds themselves to, it doesn't matter. Everything that this front office has tried to do up until this point, it has failed at. And that's why you see, and that's why I understand more than like when I first started the show 3.5 years ago, that I understand a lot more like the pessimism that some Bulls fans have, because it's like, yeah, I don't always agree, right, with the naysayers. I don't always agree, but I understand why that's where their mindset goes to, because this continues to be a team that just, it does some stuff, but then it never sees it all the way through. You went out and got Josh Giddey, cool. But you have him now on a roster that doesn't fit, right? That doesn't really fit. It doesn't really overcome some of his shortcomings, and anything, it maximizes some of them because of how he's asked to play. You move slow on that. You move Coby out of position, out of role, out of everything from what he did last year, and still a lot of that's on him for his own personal performance. But who takes somebody that excelled at something and then says, bet, thank you for that. We're struggling. We need you to go to do something else, right? And I get it. It comes via not being able, again, maybe there would have been different clarity on this roster had they been able to move from Zach and Vooch in the offseason. But everything that we have here, it just feels so fragile, right? Because any bit, like we went on the 3-game losing streak, and I bet you most Bulls fans understood and probably was just waiting for the other shoe to drop because a losing streak has to come at some point after that, because that's just the Chicago Bulls way. Every time they seem like they're taking a little bit of step forward, it gets right back neutral. I wouldn't be surprised if the Bulls go on a 4-game losing streak after a 3-game winning streak, and where are we at? A net -1 loss, right? So it's those things continuing. These things have been happening for years with this team. It's been the same thing for years. When they are the last to recognize something. And I get it that they're still reeling, and it seems like they're really trying to make sure that if they do move on from Zach, if they do move on from Vooch, they're not in an Alex Caruso situation where they just don't get the best deal possible. But at the same time, if that is your direction, you can't be frozen either. And that's what this front office seems. It's at the behest of the market every single time, and they're always behind the 8 ball. And hopefully that starts to change at some point. At some point, hopefully some luck got to roll around for you at some point in time, right? Whether it be a player, a lucky signing, somebody surprisingly just wants to come to Chicago, whatever it is. But it's not going to come via sitting on your hands. And that gets us to the next topic, right? So apparently that the Chicago Bulls, and this is no surprise, we've basically talked about this before. Zeke Najee is the player that's holding up the Chicago Bulls and Denver Nuggets reportedly getting this trade. And, even as of Mark Stein, as of yesterday, that the Denver Nuggets are still focused on Zach LaVine, but they can pivot to another player if needed. And so now that's naturally worked up that a third team could get involved in this trade talk for the Chicago Bulls and the Denver Nuggets. And that team reportedly could be, this is via ESPN Bobby Marks, that the Detroit Pistons are a team to watch to get involved as the third team in a trade between Denver and Chicago. Now, Detroit also has interest in other things. They have interest in reportedly Brandon Ingram or things like that. So it's not like that if they make a subsequent deal that they can't move on, but they have $14 million in cap space. And why is that important, right? Is that we talked about the ability to absorb contracts. So technically, and I'm not saying that this is the way that the trade will work, because Detroit, for absorbing a bad $8 million contract, is going to want something. But theoretically, that if the Bulls were to try to get and Denver would try to get Detroit involved, Detroit would be able to take in Zeke Najee's contract. They would want something else as filler, which, again, this is why I want the Bulls to be open to taking Zeke Najee's contract back, because it very well could work out that the Pistons then get a protected first-round pick or a pick swap in a trade to be able to facilitate that. Now, it would get the Bulls what they ultimately want, and that's not to take on Zeke Najee's contract. It could also get them, they'll still get Michael Porter Jr. back as well. So the way that the hypothetical deal would work out is LaVine would go to Denver, Michael Porter Jr. and Wendell Moore would come to Chicago, Zeke Najee and a Nuggets future protected first-round pick will go to Detroit. Now, the problem in this is that the Bulls then would be trading Zach LaVine and Torrey Craig, right, for just basically Michael Porter Jr. Yeah, Wendell Moore, it is what it is. He's a $2.5 million contract, but it's not anything that you're looking at and you're saying, oh, yeah, the Bulls got Thank God the Bulls got a new Wendell in here, right? But it does open some doors. And Wendell Moore is only 23 years old, so you're still getting a young player back, but not a young player who's really done much of anything in his time in Detroit. So you got to look at that. He was 37th overall pick, or 26th overall pick in the draft. So I know that an AK would try to sell that as we got a first-round pick back, but then the protected first-round pick will go to Detroit instead of coming to Chicago. And that is why I would love Chicago to keep more of an open mind when it comes to this trade, even if it means taking on Zeke Najee's bad contract, because if you can get a protected first-round pick, right, and I think the protections would have to lean towards the Bulls, right, meaning that, like, let's say it's like top 5 protected, meaning that even you can even go top 10 protected, because Denver's highly unlikely over the course of having Zach LaVine and Nikola Jokic to be below or not at least be a playing team in the West. So I would think that those fair protections on it to where it's probably going to convey are worth taking it on. We got a couple of deep drafts coming up, not as deep as this year's draft, but a couple of deep drafts coming up. That would help. So, it's like I said, I can't condemn the Chicago Bulls for not wanting to take back bad money, especially when we know the salary limitations that this team is by the ownership group. I would love to be able to say that, but it just sucks that if we do another trade where we're not willing to take on the bad contract, that the third team in the trade is the one that walks away with the first-round pick. That would just suck, right? And especially for a team that's trying to recoup assets. Not to say that Michael Porter Jr. isn't a talented player, but this is about stacking, at least in my opinion, coming into this talk. I would think that it would be about trying to get the most assets back, right? And that first-round pick, to get an unprotected first-round pick, and even if there's not a third team in it. You may even be able to convince it to be unprotected, but whatever. It's to not get an opportunity to recoup some of that back by just not taking back a bad contract. It's one bad contract, right? But like I said, I can't ever be mad, or I can't ever say that they're wrong for not wanting to take back bad money when we already got players at the end of the bench that aren't playing, like Javon Carter and Chris Duarte and stuff like that. So I can understand it in that sense, but it is what it is. You guys can let me know how you feel down below on that. Do you think that the Bulls continue to be right in this avoidance of taking on Zeke Najee's contract to facilitate a Zach LaVine trade, or do you think it should be about business and they should go ahead and get that contract back if it means closing out the deal? Or do you think no trade at all? That's still a very valid take in this as well, is to think, hey, Bulls, do no trades. Let's just see this thing through, even though I think that keeps us in the middle. But, hey, that's a valid response as well. Let me know all that down below. All right, let's get into the mailbag today. We got two that were kind of overflow from the weekend that I want to get into. The first one, this one's from Reginald.
Hey, this is Reginald from Columbus, Georgia. Just responding to the latest trade rumor of Zach LaVine to Denver for Michael Porter Jr. And I know that the salaries don't match up, so, they're going to have to throw in another player to make it work. But when I look at MPJ on the Bulls and what type of starting lineup it would be, you're looking at Giddey, Coby, LPJ, maybe P. Will, and Vooch. That would be the worst defensive lineup in history. And for some of the Bulls Nation who never really follow LPJ defensively, he's the equivalent of Josh Giddey, but the difference is offensively, where Josh Giddey can't, really shoot threes and sort of consistently, MPJ can. Like, he'll go 3 for 7 in a game, and he'll finish the game with like 22 points or something. But at the same time, he's going to give up over 20 points. So when I look at the idea of trading him to Denver and probably not getting back any picks in return, I'm not really into that deal. And I know this is probably one of the best deals you can get for Zach, but that's just during the season. I think there's probably going to be a better offer in the off season. Not because wishful thinking. That's just another year off his contract. Instead of having him for 2.5 years, he's going to be on your books for 2 years. And the minute you can actually move Zach if you hold on to him for just 1 year and get a lot back for him, because you're going to have a lot of teams with aging superstars who are making 50 plus, and they're going to be looking for, aspiring contracts, and Zach ain't going to be at the top of the list. And that team would get more of a haul for him than what the Bulls got. But, that's just my opinion. Like, if they make the deal, fine, but I think they can get a better offer in the offseason. But what's your opinion? Thanks.
I don't think offers really change in the offseason. Here's the reason why, Reggie, is that there's no market for Zach LaVine. Keep in mind, before this Denver trade, we heard that there was no market for Zach, even with this uptick, and I don't think that drastically changes this offseason. You also run the chance of, in the offseason, that a lot of teams, again, they fill up their money with other things. They see some cheaper free agents that can get them 70% or 80% of the way to Zach LaVine, and they may try to convince themselves that that's enough. Like, it's a lot different. Now, I want to be clear, there is a chance that it could get better. Let's say Zach has an amazingly strong finish to the season. There is an opportunity and a chance that trade value could get better. I'm just not saying that it's an automatic thing. It could actually get worse. What if he gets hurt? You run into a lot of what ifs. And with the way that things have gone for the Bulls as far as market value, I would not be mad at the Bulls if they want to strike where they kind of know where the value is, rather than the risk of it being in the offseason and you're not really doing anything. And another thing as well, once draft picks start having a actual number attached to them, like, it's different saying let's trade a top 18 protected pick versus, hey, let's trade the 20th pick in the draft. Well, who's going to be there at 20? Yeah, so teams start being a little bit more selective and protective of that. So you run that risk as well. And that's all I'm saying, Reggie, is that I just don't know if it's one way or another that is going to go. As far as if the offers change, but we'll see. I know, and listen, there's no trade that's going to make everybody. There's not a single trade that anybody's going to look at and say, man, we got equal value, because Zach LaVine has proven not to be a player that you're going to get equal value back for. And I think that part plays into it as well, Reggie. You let me know what you guys think down below. All right, let's get into the next one. This one's from Shay.
Okay, just Shay. Look, man, I'm not finna sit up here and tell you that I'm the biggest Coby White supporter because I didn't really like him when we first drafted him because I feel like he wasn't a point guard, and he kind of proved that. But then last year he proved that he could break in, he could hold a starting guard spot. But look, man, I gotta give credit. But I gotta defend, you know me, man, I'm gonna defend a player when it's justified. Think about it, I wasn't necessarily a Dale Terry supporter because I wanted, Walker Kessler and E.J. Liddell over him, a couple of seasons back. But I will defend a player when where it's right. And look, Coby White is not shooting well. I agree with that, y'all. Y'all have a reason to want things to change, but all this trade Coby White bullshit, come on, man. All that stuff, that gotta stop. Because, like it or not, Coby White is gonna have one of these months. It may start in January, it may start in February, but he's gonna have a hot month where you're singing his praises eventually. Let's face it, the man is coming off of injury, and I think he's probably still dealing with a little bit of that injury that he had at the beginning of the season. Now, look, I'm not saying that a lot of flack given to him does not deserve to be justified, but all that trading and shit and talking about some he's trash when y'all was saying him would be the most improved player last year and to be an all-star, come on, man. That bullshit gotta stop, bro. You gotta give him much more credit than that. That's just my opinion. But he'll get out of the slump. That's just my belief. Anyway, tell me what you think. Peace.
Yeah, Coby White is I think that they did allude to that he's been playing a little banged up, and he did that around his big dip last season, the big slump last season. So maybe Coby's just a player that needs to realize he doesn't need to play if he's not close to 100%. Like, because if that's the case, now, do I think Coby's going to come out of his slump? Absolutely. Absolutely. And the question that has to be asked here is, how do you build your team or construct your team, or is your team prepared to be in a spot for Coby to go through 10, 15 game slumps every season? Because if that's the question there, a lot of teams aren't going to be willing to do that, right? That's why when people saying things like now trade Coby this and that, like, I don't think the value is going to be quite what they think it's going to be, especially now with the slump. I just don't think so. So I think overall, like, you want Coby to work himself out the slump. Hopefully he's going to. If I had to bet on a world in which he does or does not, I bet that he does. But the question is that, okay, how long until the next slump is around the corner after he works himself out of this one? And I think that's a fair question to ask considering how inconsistent Coby has been at times. I think that's fair. So we'll end up seeing where it goes, Shay, but thank you for that voicemail. That's my time for today, guys. Make sure you guys are following the show at Bull Central Pod. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns. BullCentralPod@gmail.com. Lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We are the number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. And I see you guys, like I like to end every episode on. Love you guys. Go Bulls. See red, y'all. Peace.
This has been a presentation of the Break Media.